Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for the panel discussion Woodworking Today Round Table. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge that I am streaming from Wurundjeri country today, and I'd like to pay my respects to the Wurundjeri people, their elders past, present and emerging. And I extend that respect to those who may be joining us tonight. Thank you for tuning in again. I hope that everyone is doing okay and is safe and well. I'm glad we're able to continue on with these online events as we sort of jump in and out of lockdowns here in Melbourne. Tonight, we welcome some of our exhibitors from our current exhibition, Future Remains, which we are sadly unable to view in person. Hopefully that won't be for too long. So tonight with us, we have Anke Kindle, who explores the preciousness of timber through contemporary jewellery and carefully selects pieces of woods that embody climate and story, and as well as their working properties on the lathe. We also have Yusuf here, who creates bespoke pieces incorporating precision joinery with hand shaping and presents pieces with a clean mid-century feel. We have established furniture maker and designer Linda Fredheim. Her practice looks at function and form, and in particular, cabinet making and associations of storage and collecting, and how we use these objects to create a sense of order. Artist and wood turner Makiko Ryujin. She works with discarded timber to create sculptural objects, vessels, installations and lighting. Her practice is informed by her Japanese heritage and draws on the cultural burning ritual otakiagi. We also have Gill-Hille, who is an artist and designer, also working with ethically sourced solid timber and creates functional sculptural pieces that are expressive and make strong reference to the Western Australia coastline. And finally, that brings me to tonight's host, superstar Alexsandra Pontonio. Alex is a furniture maker and designer and makes bespoke work that is contemporary in design, but holds a sensitivity to traditional woodcraft. And her current study of work is looking at lightness and making reference to box kites and biplanes and objects that float. So Alex will be leading tonight's discussion. And but before I do hand over to Alex, I do have to sadly jump into a bit of housekeeping. We're all getting used to these online events now, so I'm sure you all know what I'm about to say, but just in case, this is a Zoom webinar, and although your camera and audio are turned off, we encourage you to get as much out of tonight's session as possible. And we welcome questions throughout the discussion via the Q&A button at the very bottom of your screen there. These questions will be addressed by us at the end of the discussion. And that's enough for me, and I'll hand over to Alex.
Thanks for those wonderful introductions, Eliza. It feels a little weird speaking to you all and not being able to see you, but thanks so much for joining this evening. I think I'll just give you a little background on how we got to tonight. We had a little catch up on Monday, which was the first time we all got to meet each other. Unfortunately, we haven't met in person. But yeah, I tasked some of the other women with the asking some questions to each other. So some of these questions come from me and some will come from the members of the group. You won't explicitly know who, but just a little background. I'm going to start off with Anke. You ready to go?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think quite distinctly in this exhibition, a feature is of a variety of ways that wood is showcased by all the artists and designers, and everyone seems to have approached the work really differently. In discussing your work, you talk about wood being as precious as jewels, and it's obvious you have a deep respect for the material. Can you tell us a little bit more about the qualities of wood that attract you most?
I think the quality of wood that attracts me most is that each piece of wood has the potential to tell a story. I think that's why we're all here, kind of in a way. So every piece of wood you pick up looks different to the next piece of wood you pick up. It's across species, but it's essentially the embodiment of where the wood grew, what climate, what temperature, what time of the year. Did it grow fast? Did it grow slow? And I think that's really special. It's like wood is like humans. There is no two two creatures alike. There's no two pieces alike. And I lived in Tassie for quite a number of years, and I did a lot of walking, and I saw some of the places where I used yew and pine, and I went to some of the places where yew and pine grew, and I was so amazed how remote those places are, and also how wet and how much rain there is. And it makes sense if I pick up a piece of timber in the workshop and I look at that timber, the sort of climate makes sense in that piece of timber. It's really an embodiment to what was around at the time it grew. And then I start counting the growth rings, and I kind of get to 50 and the piece is tiny, and I go, oh my God, this is so old. It takes so long. And it's amazing. It's like, it becomes sort of like a privilege and to hold this piece. And I think using those aspects in jewelry is really good, because you work on such a small scale that scale becomes really close to your eye, so you can sort of examine it as a surprise and a marvel. And I think that's what makes wood very special to me, and that I think that's what I would like to use in the pieces I make. It's precious and unique.
I think that's really beautiful. I had a really similar moment when I was just building this most recent piece for the exhibition, and the turned handles have the growth rings just at the top. And because I've grain matched the handles, and so I had to really study the way it went together. And I was just looking at one of the rings, and because I was really paying attention, I could see the way the tree had grown, and there were just a few years where the growth was really tiny, and I was just like, oh, drought, and it's beautiful how it tells that story, and you get those little reminders as you work with it. It's really special. If anyone else wants to jump in, just feel free. It's not just for Anke. If you've got something to share, we'd love to hear from you as well. So realizing your work as jewelry, words come to mind. I actually don't wear a lot of it, but when I think of jewelry, I think of precious things, keepsakes or heirlooms. And I particularly think of the classic imagery of someone opening a jewelry box for the first time, or seeing a precious, intricate object they must have. Can you describe the sort of responses you get about your work and how it's received by the people who acquire it?
I think mostly people smile when they see the work first. There's sort of a sense of curiosity about it. I think sometimes people get a little bit confused because it's jewelry, but they're also wearable brushes. So it's that interplay of, well, is it a utilitarian object made out of a timber, or is it a jewelry piece? And I think I like that sensation that people laugh and are curious about the object.
And they're really tactile. I imagine a lot of people just jump to wanting to touch them.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, I think often, so the next step is that people want to touch the work, and that's interesting in itself, because if you wear a brooch or a ring, less so, but all of a sudden there's this need for wanting to come quite close to your body and touch that piece of timber. So it plays a little with that sense of personal and overstepping, or is this all right or not all right, to be wanting to touch a piece of timber that someone wearing, which is, I like that aspect of whimsy and humor and playfulness, and inviting that sort of feeling the material, feeling the timber, or kind of being curious about the object itself, the timber object.
I really love the concept. I was actually chatting to Eliza about it as well, and how a lot of furniture can be quite static. And although it will have movement in, potentially have movement in the way it's designed or something, its ultimate function is in a stable place. And I really like the idea that a wearable comes with you, and it's, it comes on the journey, and that's
it becomes almost like a wearable piece of furniture, a little bit, a scaled down version of I take these places.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to move on, just keeping an eye on time, but we might come back, obviously jump in with anyone else, and we'll have some more open discussion in a little bit. Chi, I'm going to jump to you now as you have a sip of your tea. So you describe, or you've talked about woodworking as being something you've always known you were interested, but something that you've only taken more seriously after a long career elsewhere. Can you tell us about your pathway to woodworking and some positive experiences or barriers that have been a part of you getting to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. I've always been interested in woodworking ever since I was like quite young. And I'd play around in high school, like I'm sure as all of you must have, like design and technology was my favorite subject. And it's kind of limitless with encouragement of teachers of like what I could make and create. But I found that after I left high school, I did try and pursue a furniture design through some TAFE courses. And at that time, it was mainly filled with like cabinet makers, and it was quite an intimidating field for an 18-year-old to get into. And I tried to get back to it a few times, but ended up in a completely different career field of graphic design. But I guess I could never shake it. And so in my 30s, I decided to completely turn that around. And I went to the Sturt School for Wood in the Southern Highlands. And basically spent a year just completely indulging in woodworking. And I had the most amazing teachers, and they passed on all of their skills of precision joinery and timber selection and kind of sustainable timber selection. And basically they taught us how to make things that would outlive us, which I really loved, being able to pour all of this energy and creativity into something that will actually outlive you and serve, you know, a purpose in the world after you're gone. And investing in these pieces means that you're investing in something that won't end up in landfill. It has this really beautiful cycle of life that can be passed on to other generations. And so I think it's really important to remember, I guess, if you really have a passion and you're really in love with something, it's never too late to kind of change your career paths. That's what I found. And it's been ridiculously rewarding. I mean, the workshop is my favorite place in the world.
It does lead me to the next question. Like I think you've sort of answered it a little bit, but how was your experience at Sturt, and how much influence has that had in guiding your focus and your style now when it comes to your own practice?
It really was amazing. I mean, if you get to kind of have a year to do whatever you'd like to do, completely indulge in something, that was Sturt. And we had amazing teachers. I had 12 other students in the class, and because we were all from other parts of Australia and we ended up in Mittagong in the Southern Highlands, we became like family. And instead of having a teacher and 12 students, it was more like, you know, having 13 people critiquing your work and adding value and input into your work from all of the different streams that they came into. We'd have people from engineering backgrounds, people that had actually never, from accounting, that had never touched woodworking before. And so you had this really amazing input from completely different perspectives.
Do you miss that now?
I do. I really do. I'm in a communal workspace now, and so I was by myself in another workshop I set up in the Northern Beaches prior to this, but the reason that I switched to a communal workshop was because I missed that so much. I think it's a really vital part of woodworking and community in the role that it plays in creativity. It's really valuable for me, and it's just so important, like having that support and be able to just, you know, input into each other's work.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. I sort of tried to go, not alone, but I was a tenant in another maker's workshop, but I had just come from the buzzy environment. I studied at RMIT, and it was just such a buzz, and everyone would just walk up to each other's work and be like, "What are you doing? Have you thought about doing that?" You know, it was quite open, and then doing it on my own or trying, you know, having quiet days, I just drove myself crazy. And it wasn't until more recently that I've changed situations that have sort of had that flow again. And, you know, to the some of the tenants that I share a space with are probably frustrated at the amount I'll fuss over some details, but I do love talking it through.
Yeah, I think it was particularly painful for my classmates watching me trying to work out the different grains for tabletops, of the different ways that I could arrange the grains, for example, of wood. Especially, I guess you all must kind of feel this when you have a really beautiful piece of timber. You really want to do it justice. It's like you have a little bit of this weight that's put upon your shoulders to do the best job that you can possibly do with it. And so it would take me a really long time to figure out which pieces I'd use for which part of a piece, just to be able to, you know, really do it justice. So they had to sit through quite a lot of that as well.
Totally. Lots of, I always just call it the head scratching. It's 50% of the project. What's your favorite woodworking tool or machine, and why?
Ooh, it's probably between, I gifted myself a really beautiful Lee Nelson plane, a number 4, and it just cleans up the timber like the machines can't. It's just incredible the way that the shavings kind of glide off like butter. So that's a real joy to use. I sometimes forget what I'm working on because I'm just like so concentrated on the planing process, and I kind of need to like remind myself not to take too much off, that I'm finishing this thing. And the second thing, I really enjoy using rasps. So rasps, kind of like files, and so I'll use that to shape a lot of timber.
Rasp? How do you spell rasp?
R-A-S-P.
R-A-S-P.
I'll send you some great rasps.
Okay. Yeah.
So they're
actually a tool I haven't I haven't explored, and
yeah,
I've been doing a lot of study into spoke shaves at the moment, and I'm like, I've got to get into the rasps.
spoke shaves are great as well. I guess the machines can take you so far, and they can help you achieve a lot. But I really enjoy the process of hand shaping and using hand tools, and I feel like you can really connect into the timber and the piece while you're shaping, and that's probably the moment where I get completely lost. I can kind of be gone for hours using hand tools, and so spoke shaves are also really another great one, but rasps are on the top of my kind of
would recommend list.
Yeah. Anyone needs to get me a gift, rasps.
Thanks, T.
Thanks a lot.
Olive, you're up. I can't see you in my thing. I want to double check you're still there. Yeah, you're there. Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Anyway.
No, you're good. I can see you now. So you have a very distinctive style, particularly the carve work, and it contrasts with more traditional, potentially joinery focused furniture. Firstly, I'm curious to hear how this experimental approach came about. Was it like a burning desire to jump in with a grinder, or was it the extension of your fine arts studies? How was the seed planted for you?
Yeah, definitely. So I did a degree at VCA first in sculpture and spatial. I can't even think of what it's called, but we didn't really learn a lot of skills. To be honest, didn't really learn a lot of things about how to, actually make things, which was quite important to me. So then I went off to RMIT and did the same course as you, the associate degree, and basically these ideas that I already kind of had about sculpture that I couldn't execute myself, it allowed me to do that. So yeah, a lot of the ideas that are in my work now have always kind of been there. And yeah, I think it was in first year when I made these like bum stools, or the figure stools. In first year, they let me use an Arbortech bit on the angle grinder, and yeah, then nothing. It's just been like that ever since, really. Using the angle grinders, I use gouges, and I occasionally use rasps as well. But it's a lot of like hand tools, like angle grinding and specialist wood carving bits. I think in second year at RMIT, I remember a couple of the lecturers just being like, well, this is kind of the same thing. Like, it's the same thing, you know, like it's, but it's kind of like my thing now. I really, I love it.
Yeah, that's great. What would you say your favorite tool is?
My favorite tool is definitely, there's these discs that are, well, there's the Arbortech cutting discs, and then there's also these Kutzel discs, which are a little bit, I don't know, have like a slightly finer finish. And also the tool that's not my favorite, but I spend the most time with, is definitely the orbital sander. It's like,
I was wondering how you, I was like, oh, that'd be really hard to sand.
It's literally like, someone asked the other day, and was like, oh, how do you get the curves? And it's literally like months of sanding. Sanding is the biggest part of my life, I think.
Maybe there's like, maybe you can sandblast or something. Maybe there's a
I've tried that before.
You've tried? It doesn't work now. I'm sure you've tried things. So doing a little bit of background research, I noticed a post on your Instagram where you explain your work always begins with sketches, and I was quite like, given how organic it is and how much it speaks to the timber, I was sort of surprised. So considering your work from idea to end, can you walk us through the process in a little more detail, and share some insights on how you share, like how you make your design and technical decisions, but also like, do you sketch a piece and then find the wood that suits it, or do you find the wood first? Like, and what point does intuition take over?
It's all pretty intuitive. There's kind of two different processes. When I'm making the functional art, usually that starts with like the functional pieces usually start with a watercolor. That's because there's a little bit more of an element of design in that. So I have to really like consider the construction, you know, that the shapes in the functional works are definitely more controlled, I suppose. So they start with a watercolor, and then from there I'll try and source timber usually. But a lot of the sculptural pieces will be because I've found like interesting bits of timber, roadkill timber, I sometimes call it, which doesn't sound that good, but anyway, like timber I found either at, I mean, all sorts of different places, but like, sort of the kind of timber that no one else would use, and also stuff before it's like turned into an ecosystem. So things that are already dead, or things that are no longer recycled stuff as well. Sometimes those pieces, that'll be, I'll start with the timber and it'll just call to me, and I'll make something sculptural from that. But it's all very intuitive. I mean, even the carving, even though I say I do watercolors first, even though that's true, usually the carving is very just intuitive. There's no, you know, sometimes you have to draw up, like if you're doing, like spoke shaving and stuff, you'd have like a line to go to, you know. There's none of that. It's just me with either the angle grinder or a like mallet and gouge.
How do you know when you're at the point?
That's the artist, like the artist part of it. I just decide.
Just lots of stand back, lots of scratching your head.
Sometimes I ask someone, like there's a bunch of cabinet makers that share the studio or like share the factory that I'm in, and sometimes I'll go get one of them, but most of the time they're just like, oh yeah, it's all right. Like they get a bit confused about the works, that's for sure, because they're used to like MDF squares.
Yeah, something stable. So I'm sure that everyone in the group can attest to the fact that wood can be an incredibly frustrating material to work with, sometimes having a complete will of its own. And traditional woodwork sees technical practices applied to mediate things like movement and stresses from use. I'd say on a personal level, I'm a bit of a stickler for the rules and rightness, to the detriment of my creativity, but mostly because I'm afraid to make mistakes and I'm afraid of the unknown. Can you identify any challenges you've had working with the material from a technical point of view?
I suppose like occasionally I'll use a bit of timber that I've sourced like from, you know, like someone's block down south, or, you know, I've sourced a bit of timber that is still a little bit green. So sometimes it's cracking, I suppose, because the moisture's going as I've carved into it. I've never really had any big troubles with timber so far. Yeah, no, I mean, occasionally, I suppose it's just cracking and knowing that, I mean, the timber is like, even though it's dead, I was saying to someone the other day, it's alive as well. So I think that when people are interested in the work, I do sort of say to them, look, like, especially if it's because my work travels from Perth to Sydney and Melbourne all the time. The humidity changes, the temperature changes. So like a little bit of movement in the work I'd say is to be expected. But so far, so good with timber.
Yeah, cool. This one came from another panelist. What is your emotional process making a new series of work, and do you struggle to get new ideas, or is it more natural for you to get ideas and visualize your work? Are you always happy with what you end up with at the end?
I'm always happy. It's one of those things. I remember very early on, like at RMIT during the course, like everyone else was kind of going, you know, they told me that there'd be a moment where you step back and you don't like it for a minute. I don't really have that. Most of the time, the timber is a beautiful material to work with, and I love like working with the material. So that always makes me happy, I suppose. Yeah, I just love being in the workshop. I think she said that before as well. Like it's just, I just love being here, I suppose. So I'm always happy with the work because I love the job. Making a whole body of work is like, at the moment I've got a solo show at in Sydney at the gallery that represents me, Gallery Sally Jane Cuthbert, and I'm making a big body of work for that. Some of the pieces behind here. And it's just really exciting. It's just like, yeah, I just love working with timber, I suppose. Yeah.
Good. Thanks so much. Makiko, I'm going to move over to you.
Yep.
And as I was sort of alluding to when I was talking to Olive, I have a bit of a complicated relationship with working with timber myself. Whilst on one hand, I love its tactical properties and I love working with it. I love using machines and hand tools. On the other hand, I find it unpredictable, rigid, and it easily shows flaws, and that's something I don't like. I find trying to tame it more of an emotional journey than it should be, and I'm always conflicted about trying to find a balance between accepting more traditional rules for timber and pushing my own experimentation. When I get to the end of a piece and I'm about to finish, I get my work to a place where essentially I have to sit with every decision I've made, every imperfection I've either tried to control or celebrate. And I feel intimate with every millimeter of it, like I've made a decision for each of these. This place of completion is a pivotal stage in the work and requires a lot of acceptance, and I have to feel like I've done all that I can. When you finish a piece, you set it on fire.
Yes.
Can you describe the feeling of setting a piece alight and the importance of the fire element in finishing your pieces?
It's at the beginning, it was frightening, and most of the time I'm like, oh no, but it's all right. That's how I started. Like, it's just experiment that how it's gonna come, but then start accepting that I just start enjoying the change, that it's kind of it's ceremonial. It's not just
my question was, is there a ritualistic feeling in it?
Yes, it's burning shit is fun, you know. It's just a start from that, and burning own things that you made is it's a bit like making when you're a kid, like you make sand castle and at the end you just step onto it and it's like, yeah. It's that kind of feeling that's is there a bit, but at the same time it's like, oh, what have I done? But like,
do you ever have regrets while you're doing it? Or like, does it,
lot of times.
is there a process, like, do you have kind of a system for burning, or is it sort of just a, you know, do you freestyle it every time and come out with a different outcome?
It's always freestyle. That there's no control that I can do with the fire, and amount of fire I thought the burner I use is quite strong, so it happens really quickly. So
what can you talk to, like, there's a traditional element in as a part of that? Could you share a little bit of insight into that for people who don't know?
That traditionally that the burning, the sugiban, it's what I do. It's a bit different from sugiban. Sugiban is show sugiban is burned pine board. So it's a straight translation of that word is,
okay.
And it's get used for the fence pavement, and also the fence palings, and also the, what do you call the house cladding? Not cladding, outside.
Cladding. I think it's cladding.
Yeah. And burning brings the oil of the pine to the surface, and it makes the wood waterproof, more water resistant, and also char is stop insects to bite into, like it eats in.
Protective.
Protect.
And what about what you do is different? I guess you're not using pine necessarily, and you're not doing it for protective elements.
No. they do use the technique that to make the paling not to, so it's a flat board, and they don't want to make it too warpy, so they can still use it. So there's a way to stack it together and how to burn. There's a technical elements for it, but I'm completely going against it. I guess that I want them to warp and distort and
take on their own character. Amazing. Okay, this was also an artist question. And I'm going to say it from her perspective, but I won't tell you who it's from. So there's this saying my best friend's mum always used to tell us whenever we were having a whinge about someone at school, something like, one's faults are often excesses of one's virtues. It's always stuck with me, and I'd like to know if Makiko can identify any fault or virtue dichotomy in her work.
Yes, I do have, yes. I whinge a bit. I'm very stubborn. So this question, I guess it starts, so I wasn't accepted BWA, and I still grudge on it. And the reason I wasn't accepted was I didn't study traditional woodworking at school, and when I was being taught that I was, hang on a minute, it's woodworking. Do we really need to go to school for it? Did people used to go to school to get to the master craftsman? No, I think it's everyday's work, how much time we spend on the woods and working on it. So my first 3 years when I started, I did 365 days pretty much that worked through, and the mistake is nothing, that it's just a learning curve for me, and I'm not very afraid of mistakes or injuries or anything really that starts don't need best tool possible. Starting from the whatever it's possibly I can, I guess. I used the Sherwood lathe, which was available, and then I put the large.
we might have sponsors in the tune. No, we don't have sponsors.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Sherwood is fine.
No, we don't have
some
sponsors.
Sherwood, not quite made for the big piece of, I guess, wood, the wood turning.
Yeah, that you.
Yeah, Sherwood's great. Sorry. Yeah, so it's rumbles and just I wasn't sure why I can't turn. What's my fault? But it's start learning that, oh no, machinery
affects the outcome.
Yeah, it's big elements of working.
Yeah, interesting.
Tools also the chisels was that I was using was the somebody found from the street. And
oh wow.
Yeah, that
are they still the chisels you're using?
No, I
you've upgraded.
realized it matters after working on it for maybe 6 months. Yeah. And my teacher, that my mentor Carl, he's lent me so many different tools and I still use some of his work tools.
Amazing.
Yeah, now and yeah, I guess so my works, yeah, it's appears on my works in the way that more, yes, my stubbornness probably shows, craziness shows on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that being bold is the my I guess it's a fault too. But I got injured by that, but yeah, that but without that, I don't think I probably still not making anything. So
thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Makiko. Linda, I'm going to move over to you. Can you just say hi so you pop up on my screen?
Hi everyone.
Hello, hi Linda, how are you? You've been a figure in the woodworking scene for quite a long time. Can you give us a brief background on where and why you started and what's been inspiring for you?
So I originally trained as a physiotherapist, and I bought a little house in 1985 and needed a lot of renovations to it and didn't actually have any woodworking skills. I'd always been used to making stuff, but not in woodwork. So I went off and did some adult ed courses, and along the way I then went and did some TAFE courses, and I went to a talk given by a American furniture artist, Christina Madsen, who came to UTAS and gave a talk about American female woodworkers, and I looked at all the beautiful cabinets and I went, I could do that. So enrolled at UTAS in 1989, sorry. So yeah, I've been just making stuff since then. Yeah. Well, I can't remember what the rest of the question was.
So what's been inspiring to you during that time since 89, 32 years ago?
Yes.
I know that number.
I love cabinets and drawers. I love Art Deco. I love Japanese tansu cabinets. I love campaign furniture. It's all about that. We use all those things to put stuff in and create order, and also create a sense of yourself. When you go somewhere, those pieces of furniture will come with you and give you a sense of comfort and order. So I just love making cabinets. Drawers and boxes is my favorite. And at one point I could tell you how many drawers I've made, but I've since lost count. And I've been having a lovely afternoon this afternoon, actually making some more drawers. So that was really nice to get onto that again.
Amazing. That was one of my questions, actually. Can you tell us a bit more about your fascination about how things open and close?
I love the mechanics of drawers, and it was so exciting when I finally made a drawer and it just worked perfectly without too much fitting. And when I first started making cabinets and drawers, it'd be hours and hours of planing and sanding and getting the drawer to fit properly, and then I'd forget that I hadn't put the bottom in. So when I put the bottom in, it would go slightly out of square, so it's like start again with all that fitting. And I just love that process of pulling something open and seeing what's inside, and having a drawer that just glides beautifully. Yeah. And so often in some of the pieces I've made, I've put things inside the drawers. It's part of the piece, so that even if the object is empty, you get a sort of surprise of what might be in there or what might have been in there once. So little engravings and text and stuff like that. Oh, I can't hear you, Alexsandra.
Alex, you're dropping.
Oh.
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I think my earbuds might have gone flat. So I'd like you to speak about the work in the exhibition. Considering your extensive work history, what has brought you to where you are now in your woodworking career and the work you're currently exploring? And importantly, where on earth did you get the idea to make a timber bag?
So when I first started woodworking, one of the books I read was a book about the Bauhaus, and I loved that early modernism and a lot of the designers and makers in the Bauhaus, particularly Marianne Brandt. And so I saw a colour plate of colour and form exercises that the students used to do, and just the shapes of it sort of suggested maybe some handbags could be what they might be. So I was sort of interested in that, so I explored that idea quite a lot. I'd been thinking about making some timber handbags for quite a few years, but never sort of really got onto it. And so it was a chance exhibition that I was invited to go in 2 years ago for the 100 years anniversary of the Bauhaus. Made me sort of think more about those little bags, and I went back to it and yeah, just worked away with some cardboard and a protractor and a ruler and worked up some shapes that I thought would work, and then thought about what I'd put in, how I'd get that colour into it. In the end, I just used coloured neoprene, which sort of unlike an industrial feel.
Have you used neoprene before?
No, never.
It's a really fun. When I saw the pieces in the exhibition, I was like, pop.
Well, I have lied there. I do use neoprene in my other job. I use it, sew it up to make garments for people who might have an injury. Yeah, so I had a bit of experience.
Maybe you can, the audience, unless they've done really good research, they might not know that you have two parallel careers. Could you tell us a little bit about that and how you manage it?
Yeah, so I'm actually also a physiotherapist, and when I went to art school in the 80s, I thought that I'd probably change careers, but I found it was really handy having a wage earning career while I was studying, because I could always work through semester breaks or just after school and earn a little bit of money. And I've then continued to work in physio all along, and actually now my area is a hand physiotherapist, so I deal with people who've had hand injuries and see quite a few woodworkers. So that's really good for me, because I have a really good understanding of what they're trying to do and help them get rehabbed and back to work. And also, as part of that job, as I mentioned earlier, I get to make stuff. I make splints and garments and things like that. So in my work, I have a sewing machine and we have thermoplastics, and so it's great.
So do you find you have to switch on and off between jobs, or they kind of inform each other?
I do switch off and on between jobs. So when I'm at work, when I'm my physio job, I forget all about my woodworking projects, and I'm still quite surprised when sometimes people ask me what I'm working on. I have to sort of have a double take and
a hand splint. I mean, a box.
Yeah, I want to put my other hat on. But the two jobs do inform each other, and I love being in the workshop where I don't have to think about anybody else's problems. I've just got my own problem there on the bench, how I'm going to resolve something or make it. But also I love being in my physio job where I can use the experiences that I've got in the woodwork shop, as I said, to help people get on with things.
Awesome. Have you noticed many changes in the field over your long-spanning career? And perhaps, if it's relevant, can you touch on your own experience or what it's been like being a woman in a field traditionally dominated by males?
Yeah, when I first started, so I remember once taking some furniture somewhere, and it was in the back of our truck, and people who were delivering it to looked at my partner and said, "Did you make this?" Because they just assumed he was a man, that he would have made it. But it's really only ever happened to me 2 or 3 times where that has been the assumption. And I would say now, you never get that assumption. I don't think people would say that sort of thing anymore, because it's so much more common. When I was at school, we only had cooking and sewing, but now I think all you people have done materials design, technology, or something similar at school. So it's fantastic, I think, that you've got every possibility to move into woodworking. And it's not sort of seen as being odd, but I think there is still maybe a little bit of surprise, but I don't think people are quite as surprised as they used to be.
Yeah. I guess that leads us into the next little part of the conversation, where I'd like to invite anyone from our panel to jump in. And I just wanted to say, when we did catch up on Monday night, it was sort of the first time. It was lovely to get to know everyone, but also the first time that I've been in a situation where I'm in a circle of woodworkers, professional woodworkers, and no men were present. It's quite a rarity when we consider this field is a field. It's quite a rarity for all of us women to be together when it is a field traditionally dominated by men. Having our work recognised for its own merit is obviously the preference in bringing up this topic. But I think it's important. I think it's important that we don't give our gender more importance than the work itself. But since we're here in this unique platform, perhaps anyone else can share their experience and whether being a woman in the industry has ever been a barrier or even advantageous.
I think it's a bit different for me, maybe because it's half based in art. I actually make works that just kind of make comment on me being a woman. So I've always found that it's quite important to talk about being a woman with my work. Yeah, I mean, on Monday we discussed about whether to talk about this that much, and for me it was really important that we talk about it because, like a lot of people, I don't think that I was aware that it just wasn't presented to me like woodworking when I was younger, I suppose. I didn't do it at school, but I think it's really important to try and like normalize it and, you know, encourage it, but also know that like we've got different things to bring to it as well. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but
no, it totally makes sense. Interestingly, I got somebody from the group to ask me a question, and they asked if I had just from your own experience and not experience at high school. The person asked me whether I ever had a maker, mentor, or teacher who has been pivotal in my path. And I was fortunate enough to go to an all-girls school that did offer woodworking, and my teacher was a woman. And she was so encouraging of me, and she always let me do things that she wouldn't really let other students. She just had confidence in a 13-year-old, using some tools that other teachers wouldn't let me use. And that was really special. But just on my own reflections, I still felt that it didn't seem like an easy career to pursue being female identifying, woman identifying. And my school really pushed, other parts. And so I ended up not taking it into year 12, and I chose more academic subjects, and it took me a long time to return to it. And then in that space, I felt returning to it, I thought the space would be intimidating, and I was unsure on how to navigate it. Perhaps somebody else can to add to that. I think, I
was just going to say something. That when I meet a lot of women woodworkers or girls who want to be working wood, I always So the most important thing is actually find the tools that work for you. I mean, that's separate to what you're talking about, Alexsandra, but finding the right size drills and hammers and chisels that actually feel comfortable in your hand and easy to use. So, and then try not to build anything that you can't sort of move around too easily. Big stuff is hard to move around.
Yes, I would say that. I'd say that actually, I mean, maybe that's just me being a little bit weaker as well. Maybe that's, but I would say that sometimes things are too heavy. I make a lot of really heavy stuff. So like sometimes I made a table earlier in the year and it was like, I made it by myself, but it took 7 men to lift. And in those moments, I'm like, you know, maybe that's, but that's also, I need to go
Is that
I know.
a huge Jarrah table?
Yeah, big Jarrah.
Yeah, I actually, when I was asking your question earlier and I was talking about some of the difficulties, I thought maybe weight and even the glue ups.
Yeah, definitely.
And do you use clamps or do you have a press?
I use clamps, but it's definitely, I think there is certain, I don't know if it's because I'm a woman or if it's just I'm not big enough, you know, but there are certain aspects of this that are a challenge, definitely. And also because I work in a fairly solitary environment and like pretty much everything I make completely by myself. So I think that,
I think there's a part of woodwork where you just need a mate. You know, glue ups get really stressful and you just need someone to be like, I'll put the glue in the hole for you when you get the next bit ready.
You just hold this bit.
Yeah.
Alexandra, I think if Laura was here with us tonight, you just have to fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a matter of pretending you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And one day you'll be very confident, but I think we're all the same. You have to just sort of go to the timber yard, not accept any help. You have to pretend you know what you're doing, and you get respect eventually. And
I definitely feel like I've gotten to that point now. I just the early insights and potentially for any audience members who are questioning what it's like getting into the field, and maybe that's why they've tuned in. Just thought it might be encouraging to hear some perspectives and how we've overcome them. But yeah, definitely the equipping yourself, walking in like this.
Actually, or sometimes I put on more of a tradie voice. I've said mate, I've never said mate before in my life, but I'll walk into the yard and be like, mate, you know, it's something.
Great. Well, we might, unless anyone else has anything they want to throw in or anything they want to say and contribute to the
I guess
this evening.
That but I guess that the woodworking, that part that we need to be a manly or we need to be knowledgeable, I think that can be changed. I think it should be changed, and we should work towards to somewhere that very you know, the person who do not like to talk with the large voice can still enjoy going to tool shop and be able to get a good service. I think that's, we pay same amount of money. I think we should be equally I think served. I think that I think that what we need to do right now is, I guess that's what it is, but I think we do all need to work towards to somewhere that anyone can go, anyone can do workshop, woodworks without feeling intimidated. I think there is a lot of work we still need to do, and I think a lot of male workers need to work very hard to change it. I think.
I agree.
This traditional woodworking tradition is very hard. I find it's very heartbreaking in many ways. That I don't know how many times I cried and just felt like I want to leave, you know.
I'm sorry that was your experience. I think things are changing. I see women working in the timber yards too sometimes, and that helps.
I think it's really funny. You don't really notice, like if you're making a cup of tea or if you're, you know, kind of going about your daily life, or if I'm putting something through the thicknesser, I don't really think about my gender. And I think it's only when other people point it out, you find that, oh, maybe it's a little uncommon. It's a little more uncommon. But I think there has been a really big shift in this department, in terms of there being a lot more balance between male and female woodworkers, which has been really beautiful to see. And I have to say, like all of my peers and teachers, and I've had really good experiences. And I guess sometimes when I haven't had great experiences, arming myself with like a little more knowledge, walking into a timber yard, walking into a tool shop has really helped. And you actually end up helping change people's perspectives, I think, along the way when you get to do that.
I always find people are really interested in what I'm making and they want to see pictures. I really like sharing in those scenarios where it's an audience I would never expect.
Yeah.
I think we might open up to the audience. Is that okay? Eliza, are you going to pop back in?
I certainly will be.
Oh,
yeah, I mean,
it's already been an hour.
I know. I wanted to go on for longer, and yeah, you've managed the time so well, Alex. And yeah, good stuff. Well, I reckon we've got a couple of questions in this Q&A section here. So if anyone else wants to pop one in, we'll see if we can get to them. But I reckon I'll ask this to you, Alex, just so you get to say a little bit more and let us know more about your practice. Sometimes as the host, you know, you're directing questions to everyone else, obviously. So yeah, how do you approach a new piece? This is from Lana, by the way. How do you approach a new piece? What's your design process, particularly when you're given an open brief?
First, I have an emotional meltdown. No, I really struggle I don't struggle. Sometimes I get these little ideas and they, you know, as I'm working on a different piece, I'll get a little idea, but I never really act on them. But when I get given so for example, the piece that I made for Craft Victoria is based on a piece I had built for some clients. And when I went to sit down with them, I, you know, was talking about they wanted a bookshelf, like a shelving unit and storage. And I was like, yeah, is there something you like? They're like, oh, no, we just like your work. And I can't really design out of nowhere. I don't have the drive to just explore things on my own. It's just not. Obviously, once I get an idea, I can take it. But I find the seed really important. And I asked them, I just said, you know, what do you like about my work? And they pulled up a sideboard I had designed that sort of floats in its legs. And they just said, I really like the lightness of it. And so then I just went home and was just like, what's light? What are things that are light? And I just chose kites. And I started Googling kites and the history of kite making and the history of flight. And then that kind of was the catalyst. And so my sketching and everything was derivative of the imagery I saw. And that was quite an artistic approach. Like I'm not always that, you know, I don't always look at imagery and let that inform my work. Sometimes it's the other way around. But yeah, so I do that. Do they want to know how I make it? Like how I get from that point to the idea?
Yeah, why not?
So I do a bunch of sketches and I was really like honest about sharing those, even though I'm not I can draw, but it takes a lot of time, you know, to get my imagery right. But I'm happy to share ugly sketches because when I was studying, if someone could just draw something, I could start to see it and I could see what they were talking about. I didn't really worry if the image looked good or not, as long as it communicates something. Yeah. So I'm really fluid with the way I'd share that information with clients. And then when I kind of start getting a shape or form or ideas that I like, then I start to build it. Obviously, I look at other furniture and I figure out how things go together. And then I jump into CAD and I start to 3D build the piece. So I'll make decisions on proportions and stuff as I'm 3D modeling. And pretty much my work my renders are their result. It's pretty weird. Like I don't make a lot of decisions as I build. I might prototype a few parts, but if I make changes while I'm building, I actually update my 3D model. So what's there, like I was amazed with this big bookcase I built. I put the render and the photograph next to each other and they're exactly the same. I'm a real like stickler. And yeah.
Does that happen to a lot of the other panelists? Maybe not Makiko and Olive, but yeah, that initial drawing.
So when I take my work to get it photographed, amazing photographer in Hobart called Peter White, he's quite controlled, not shouldn't say he's controlled, he has his own ideas about how he's going to photograph your work, so you just have to stand back. And generally, the view he'll take of my piece will be exactly the same as my render. We both see it from the same perspective, yeah.
That's so
I mean,
good.
Much better when he photographs it.
Yeah, I've seen photographs. They're quite beautiful. He did Laura's table for the show.
Linda, does your is like, because a lot of people fear the 3D space, but I find it very creative and I find that I can really work and start to make decisions. Do you also work that way?
So when I first started, I was just always making models, and then I went to 3D modeling in the computer. But actually, I still do that, but I've actually gone back more to making little cardboard models and MDF models. Actually, I like that holding the object in your hand, and I find it's really lovely for clients. Somehow, I think clients feel that if you can make a model, you can probably make the whole thing, and it gives them a lot of confidence. And I mean, a rendering is good, but I don't have a fabulous program that I use, so my renders probably aren't as nice as yours. But I find the little models are great, and you can just, it's like the same with 3D modeling in the computer, you just break things off and rearrange them and play with it. And yeah, so so I use both, but probably at the moment I'm doing more real stuff.
I'll model like little aspects, so if I'll always test the joinery before before I model it. Works together.
And Chi, I've seen some models, like built mini models or maquettes of your work too. Do you also use like a CAD system or?
No, because I work on the computer so much because of like parallel careers. I don't touch any 3D programs. So I'll make everything, I'll create little models of everything to scale, like to the millimeter to scale. And that's how I basically start out, as well as sketching. But I find that even when I've actually started making a piece, sometimes I'll go back to the original model that I had and start changing and tweaking it, which is what I did for this piece as well. Originally, it was very different to how it's turned out. Because in the making process, I just didn't feel like it was as resolved as it could be. And so making these little models has really helped me get an understanding of how it would look in the real world, I suppose. I find it really difficult to imagine how something kind of translates out of the digital space into the physical space. So I quite like that, like tactile model making.
Yeah. Fascinating. Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. But I have a lot of tiny models now I need to like make a house for so they can all live in.
Yeah, like yeah. And Anke, sorry, I'm really sticking on this one point, but I'm being a bit selfish out of my own curiosity. You have really quite precise drawings of your pieces when you went before you start as well, or do you use they're drawings though? Do you use?
Yes, they are. I think I'm very analog, so I do draw a lot. Like I go from sketches to drawings to models or maquettes or mock-ups and test pieces. Like I will test, and often in that process pieces will change inevitably, or sometimes I go, because I turn on the lathe I turn my forms, I will make a test form and then I turn the real piece, and it will change just because the timber will do something that it wants to do and I have to go, okay, let's do that then. I'm sort of, that's sort of how the process evolves generally.
Yeah, and I mean that's the nature of working with like an organic material, I guess. Was it Laura, who sadly is unable to be with us tonight? Was she saying, Alex, the other day, something about like when you're on the lathe that you're more in tune with the timber as well? So
oh, she was talking about being on the saw, I think.
the saw,
and she was saying you feel the vibration and you feel the cut and you just start to really, I don't know if she used the word dance, but she was dancing with the timber in the way that she was describing. It was quite beautiful.
Yeah. All right. Now, sorry, I'll get on to the questions from our audience.
The audience.
Yeah, everyone. And I do realize it is past 7 o'clock. We're all happy to be here continuing to talk these for a little bit longer. You're more than welcome to stay and join us too, or you can leave. But yeah, I'll get on to Gillian's question, which is a question for Makiko. And Gillian would like to know whether you ever use green wood or always seasoned for your pieces. And does the whole piece catch a light? Do you have to extinguish it? Or is it a controlled charring?
I use, most of the time I use green wood, which
Because you get your, oh, sorry, I'm interrupting. Because you get your timber often from a friend who is an arborist.
Yeah. Before they go to chippings,
yeah,
they call and, hey, Makiko, I've got wood. Do you want it? Yes. Do you want to buy it? Yes, sure. Yeah. And I usually buy I only buy the wood which the affordable wood for me is only the wood that's from them, that free wood from friends or wood from the arborist, and I pay for the labor of carrying from that one place to other. And what was the another question?
Does your whole piece catch a light when you when you fire it, or is it controlled char?
It catches fire. Yes, it's that day I was burning pine, and pine has got lots of resin. Has so much. The pine that I was burning has got so much resin in it, and it's just got quite big fire. And I was like, that kind of understood that why the fire in the nature is so, it creates so much of like, it's such fuel that, so my works catches fire a lot of times, and it's a lot of times it's crumbles parts too.
Yeah, because it burns all the way through.
Yeah, some parts burns way through. Yeah.
You touched on it briefly. Here I am again being really selfish with my curiosity questions. You touched on it briefly earlier in the conversation, but I'd love to. You've mentioned to me previously before, and I think you should share it now, that you find the beauty that burning adds to your work after such precise sort of laboring work on the lathe. It achieves something that you don't think that you can with that you can on your own, and that you sort of love the unpredictability of it. Did you want to go into a little more detail about that, or?
Yes, sure. That I guess that I want, that's something that I think human cannot do, that some the disformation of the wood that being made by the fire is some sort of form that I cannot make in my head, or that it's not something that I would I guess that to what do you say, that design, it's not that the design I can create on my paper or that decide at the beginning. It's more like just let it happen and accepting. It's that the acceptance is a bit hard part sometimes, but it's, for me, it's the very important part of my work, that what I end up is what I do have, and sometimes it's not the beauty, like it's sometimes it ends up something that I rather wanted to keep the first shape, but but after a while I just walk back and come back and see that no, it wasn't that bad. that acceptance is for me, it's learning, like it's also the life learning things for me that to reflect on.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And then, I mean, this is one from Julian Pratt, and they would like to know whether being a woman brings anything different to each of your practices, aesthetically, imagery or objects. Yeah. Oh, this is too for everyone as well, so can all jump on in. But yeah,
I think Linda might have something to say. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we do design things a little bit differently. When I was at art school, most of the boys tended to make quite heroic pieces. They're very complicated, very big, whereas I was always more interested in making something small and intimate. So that would be a very superficial answer, but I think looking at everyone's work again on the catalogue last night and reading everyone's statements, I think that is possibly something that quite a few of us are interested in, that small, intimate nature. And I think, and also I know Anke has quite interesting threads going through her work to do with women. Yeah, so I think there is a difference, but it's not enormous, but it is there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anke, do you want to say something about that?
Me?
Yeah.
When I think I can only design from my viewpoint and the way I understand the world, which is I am a woman. So I do think a lot about, is there a difference? My work uses at the moment the brushes as a symbol of women's work, and women's work in the home, and the brush kind of symbolizes that. But that's only from my viewpoint. I cannot say if there's a general way that women design. I know that there was recently, I think in Britain, an exhibition of women in design, which was a movement in I think a very strong influence, a group in Britain in the 80s. And there was sort of ways identified of what the group did because they were all women. But I think the word is out. The word is still out. I think we can still, discuss this forever. I think an hour and a bit might not be long enough. So yes, my viewpoint is just that I design from a woman perspective, and I use wood. So that, yeah.
Oh, that's good. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, there is a question here that wants you to go in a little bit more detail, but did you want to quickly go in a little more detail, or should I go into another question? Yeah, go. Okay, yeah, you do. Take your head. I'm like, yeah. So someone has asked, can you tell us a little bit more about the politics of your work? Your pieces speak about notions of femininity and the role of women throughout history. Yeah, because we haven't really touched too much on that brush aspect of your work in this discussion. Not only like how it's a beautiful craft and the objects are so beautiful that you've collected and has inspired your works. But yeah, the terminology that's used in German to refer to, yeah, I'll let you go.
Oh, so the brushworks and what's in the exhibition at Craft in the Future Remains exhibition is they're brushes, but wearable brushes, and it's work that I've done for quite some time now, and it started with an expression in German that is a very nasty and mean expression, which is Kratzbürste, and it basically means scrubbing brush, and it refers to women who were cleaning in the home. And I've taken this idea and turned this idea into the wearable wooden pieces, just to play with the notion is, why is it nasty that, you know, you clean and you essentially save your people's lives because it's clean and there's no deadly diseases. I think this is a very old expression. So it was looking at a utilitarian object, really, and the utilitarian object is made from timber. It's really traditionally made from timber, and it's still largely made from timber, and the expression is still around. So I was playing with that notion.
Okay, so I think maybe we'll do 2 more questions and then we might wrap it up, because we have gone over time a little bit, but I mean, we could talk and talk forever. This is from Joma. When a finished work piece has an unnoticeable flaw, do you rather than point it out to clients or to fellow woodworkers, or would you rather point it out to clients or fellow workers, or do you just say nothing?
Nothing.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool. Next question. So, okay.
Does everyone say nothing?
Yeah.
Just it out.
You pointed out.
I think a really interesting thing about that question is and I've seen it happen so many times, when something goes wrong with a piece or it goes wrong with the timber, the solution that the woodworker has to come up with to resolve it, it ends up making it into this completely unique piece, because no one's ever tried to make that piece with that particular problem, with that particular solve. And it ends up even elevating the piece sometimes, I'd say, than what it was originally. So sometimes the flaws, if you flip the pancake, can actually turn into something really beautiful and unique. And when that happens, you do point it out, because it's just such a great resolve. And I've seen it happen so many times.
I think sometimes you're making it, you see a terrible flaw, and it just breaks your heart because you've made an error. But when you look at it the next day, it's often not as bad as you think it is. And then when you put the whole thing together, that small error just sort of disappears. And it's part of it, but it's not actually a big deal like what it was at midnight one night.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll have, if anyone else wants to say anything. Is there an echo? Do you hear an echo now?
Yeah.
Maybe that's a sign that we should wrap it up. Yeah, it's the last question was, you all seem to come to your craft site from the side direction, like sideways, via art or side project, or came back to it later in life. What brought you back to working with wood, and what was the thing about woodworking that you couldn't let go? Gee.
I can jump in on that one. It's like falling in love with something. It's always in the back of your mind, and I guess yeah, you can't really leave it, and getting to a point in your life of where you're putting your time and your energy, you start to question where you're putting your time and your energy into. And it was just ridiculously clear to me that this is where I wanted to spend my time. This is where I wanted to put my energy into. And I just wanted to create pieces that would outlive me, to leave behind things that were beautiful and functional in the world, to potentially help elevate people's lives through their interactions with them. And having something that that's that loud in your ear, I guess you can't really ignore that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Olive, did you have anything to say?
Really?
Okay, well, that's a sign. Let's all wrap it up.
Yeah, I feel like she summed it up very well there about the longevity of pieces, and yeah, I guess material for sure. Someone else I think asked like these other materials. Yeah, and I fall under the wood. I've tried as well, but the best.
Yeah. There is a little bit of echo, isn't there? Yeah. All right. Well, I'll wrap it up. Thank you so much, Alex, for leading this discussion. Thank you to everyone for coming tonight and seeing this. And and we hope that we'll be able to open up our space soon to welcome you all. We are hoping to extend the exhibition slightly. More details about that to come later, but yeah, thanks so much everyone for tuning in and for the great discussion and great questions. See you on the flip side.